Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy is on the air. Once again, it's Pub Sports Radio, Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Thursday, November 4th, Ian Cameron with you. This is your look at pro football every week on both sides of the border, CFL, NFL, each and every Thursday right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Good to have you with us again. As always, we'll start in the CFL, where we have just 3 weeks left in the regular season, which is hard to believe. The season's just gone by so fast, as it usually does. 4 games on tap. Let's get started. We've got a game that I will be in attendance for Friday night. Tim Hortons Field, the Hamilton Tiger Cats hosting the BC Lions. We've got the Ticats 6.5-point home favorites in this game. Total in the 43.5, 44 range right now across the board. For these two teams, well, for the BC Lions, look, they're still alive mathematically for the playoffs, but they're at the point now where it's like, they need an early Christmas miracle at this point to get in the CFL playoffs, because they're 2 games behind third place Calgary, who are 6-6 in the West. BC's 4-7. BC, or I should say in the past, they're the 4th place team in the West Division, has had a good enough record to cross over and take out the 3rd place team in the East Division and take their spot in the playoffs. I don't think that's going to be the case this year, because you look at the 3 teams in the East. You've got Toronto leading the division at 7-4. You've got my Ticats at 6-5, and you've got the Montreal Alouettes at 6-5. So right now, BC is 2 games behind all of those teams as well right now. So the bottom line is BC's got to look at these remaining games and say, if we're going to have any kind of chance whatsoever, and it's an outside chance, it is a shot in the dark at absolute best for them to try to make the playoffs. But they've got to look at these remaining games and say, you know what, if we have any chance to make the playoffs, we've got to win out. We got to win every remaining game. So for that reason, you would expect BC to have a desperate effort, but desperate effort hasn't led to anything successful on the football field lately for this BC team. They've just been absolutely awful. 5 straight losses. Finally, at least they were competitive last week against the Toronto Argonauts. They really had probably their best game in weeks. Right back and forth it went with them and the Argos. They end up losing, though, in overtime, 31-29. They go for 2 to try to tie the game in overtime. They don't get it, and that allows the Argos to get the victory in that game. Really, the thing that we noticed with BC is the defense has fallen apart for this team. They've had some injuries in the secondary. Their defensive line has not really gotten any sort of pass rush during the last several games, and that combination has led to just a ton of issues defensively for the BC Lions. Their last 5 games, they've allowed 31, 30, 39, 45, and 31 points. It just hasn't been a very good defensive football team during this losing streak that they've been on. They'll try to rectify it here, but now they face a Hamilton team that, look, for the majority of the season, the Ticats offense has been hit or miss, to say the least. That's the best way to put it, hit or miss. And it's especially been that way with Jeremiah Masoli at quarterback. We remember early in the year, before he got injured, he started the first few games of the season for the Ticats, and the offense just didn't look right. He didn't play well. He didn't look right. And they really had a tough time moving the football and putting up points early in the year. Then he got hurt. Dane Evans came in, and that's when the offense picked up a bit. Of course, Dane Evans got hurt. David Watford had to start a few games for the Ticats with both quarterbacks out, and the offense went back to sputtering a little bit once again. And then finally, they got Jeremiah Masoli back again and of course, Evans got healthy, but then Masoli came back finally, and then Evans got hurt again. Masoli came back, and then they decided, well, we're going to try to run with Masoli here, see how it goes. And when he first came back from that injury, he had some struggles for the Ticats the first few games he came back. But now all of a sudden, you look at the last few games, you can tell that he had about 4 or 5 starts in a row now, Masoli, and you can tell he is getting more and more comfortable in the offense. And 2 straight now. Look, Edmonton and Ottawa were the 2 opponents, the 2 worst teams going right now in the CFL. So you got to put a little asterisk next to these last 2 games offensively for Hamilton. But 32 points against the Red Blacks, 39 last week against Edmonton. He was starting to throw the deep ball again. He was starting to run with the football again. And that was an element of Masoli's game before all the injuries that was was what made him a really good quarterback. The dual threat component, the ability to run with the football when the pocket collapses and when the play breaks down. And he had basically lost that a little bit. But he is starting to run the ball again. They get Don Jackson at running back, who had 120 rushing yards last week. He hasn't played all year for the Ticats. And, when they got him from Calgary, I thought for sure he was going to be their starting running back, and he just hasn't been able to get on the field due to injury until last week against Edmonton, and he runs for 120 yards. He was terrific running the football for the Ticats. And you look at the receivers that have stepped up now. They won't have Braylon Addison, and that sucks because he's played so well for the Ticats. So that does hurt, but guys have stepped up. They've got Speedy B had one of his best games of the year last week. Jalen Ackland's been outstanding. Stephen Dunbar's been catching some balls. Tim White has been magnificent. So, the Ticats have found some other options, some other weapons at wide receiver. So, yeah, they'll miss Addison, but, you miss a guy like that when other guys aren't stepping up. We're seeing now in the last two games, there are other receivers stepping up for Jeremiah Masoli in the passing game here for the Hamilton Ticats. So that's a good sign. The BC defense has been miserable. The BC offense had struggled too, but last week they put up 29 points in the loss against Toronto. And Michael Riley got two of his best receivers back from injury for the Lions last week. Dominique Rhymes had been out for a long period of time. Lucky Whitehead had been out for a period of time. They both returned from injury last week. So put those two guys with Katoy and, of course, Brian Burnham. And all of a sudden, you've got a decent receiving core here for BC. So the one concern I have about this game is that for all week long, from a totals perspective, they've been looking at some heavy gusts of wind in Hamilton. And for someone that goes to that stadium, 6 or 7, 8 times a year, 9 times a year during a full season, I know when the wind is whipping around that stadium, it is difficult to kick. It is very difficult to throw, especially the deep ball in that stadium when it's windy. And that would be the one concern that I have here. But I definitely had the over circled in this game. And from a side perspective, less than a touchdown here with Hamilton, I'd lean to them, to be honest with you. Toronto, it's BC on the road for a second straight week. Now, Toronto to Hamilton's not a big trip. I get it. But, it's 3 weeks in a row away from home for BC. That could, catch up to them a little bit here. And to be honest with you, the defense still is not playing all that well. The good news is they had some offense last week that allowed them to hang in there and have a chance to win that game against Toronto. But the defense has been just so bad. They've been very poor tackling team as well. Breakdowns in coverage defensively against the pass. I mean, it really has been just a gamut of problems for the BC defense. So, again, keep your eye on this wind forecast. There won't be rain. The wind is what I'm worried about. And as I always say, wind impacts totals more than rain. But if the wind, is not terrible, there should be some points scored in this game. And I also lean to Hamilton here at -6.5. BC's mathematically alive, but after another gut punch of a loss last week, I think they know it's pretty much done for them. They've got to know they're just not playing well enough. Can they realistically expect to sweep the last 3 games? Edmonton, they'll probably win that game, but Calgary and Hamilton are their next 2 opponents. It's a team that's just not finding ways to win games right now. So difficult to back BC right now. I lean to the home favorite and also the over, but again, check the wind forecast. Saskatchewan and Edmonton, we've got Saskatchewan 6.5 point road favorites, 46 the total in this game. I'm on Saskatchewan here, -6.5. I mean, Edmonton's winless at home. They've covered 1 point spread all season at home. You look at their home losses as well, but because there's no home field edge, you could make a case that Edmonton has a worse or a worse home field right now than Toronto. And that's saying something. Like, that is a very angry, apathetic, disinterested fan base right now. This is a season that's gone off the rails for the Edmonton Elks. The 6 losses in a row for them, 1-5 against the spread in those last 6 games. As I mentioned, they're 0-6 straight up, 1-5 against the spread at home this year. I mean, that, and I was, I watched, of course, every second of Hamilton at Edmonton last week. That, like, there was barely 20%, 25% capacity in that stadium. I mean, they've just completely turned a blind eye to Edmonton Elks football in that city. It's Oilers time now in Edmonton. They don't give two shits about Edmonton football right now there. That is not a home field edge that they have whatsoever, and that's why teams feel so comfortable, playing in Edmonton. And that's why Edmonton's been so bad at home. They have no home field edge. They have no crowd, the season's been a disaster. Obviously things didn't go well with Trevor Harris and the team. He didn't play as well as he should have or could have. I get that, but the team didn't help him out either. And then they threw him under the bus when he struggled in that game against Winnipeg. First game off a significant injury, he struggles. They throw him under the bus and bench him for Taylor Cornelius, who hasn't done a goddamn thing in this league so far. I mean, they love this Taylor Cornelius guy. I've yet to see anything out of him. Like, really? I mean, you love this guy so much, you would think by now he's done something. Could you win a game? Could you win a football game for your football team, please? Before we have this love in here with Taylor Cornelius. It's ridiculous. I mean, Edmonton's talking about this guy like they think he's going to be the future quarterback for this team. And he's going to be the guy that saves the day. He hasn't even won a start yet. This guy hasn't even won a game yet for the Edmonton Elks. And we're that high on him to the point where, we basically sent a veteran quarterback who's at least won many games in this league to the bench. And obviously that ended poorly. That was the last straw. Harris needed a change of scenery. Obviously, it was clear at that point management didn't want Harris around. They make the trade for send him to Edmonton, and then they bring in Nick Arbuckle now because I think they realized after they traded Harris away, maybe we need to back up. Maybe we need to pump the brakes on saying Cornelius is our guy moving forward because he just hasn't shown you enough consistency or quality play. So they traded for Nick Arbuckle after that, and now the question is going to be going into this game. Who starts at quarterback for Edmonton? Cornelius, or now are they going to give Nick Arbuckle his first start here at quarterback for the Edmonton Elks? That's a good question. And look, James Wilder Jr., Greg Ellingson, they haven't practiced all week. Darrell Walker's banged up. Like, you talk about their skill position talent, that's three of their best skill position players right there. It's their starting running back and their two best receivers, and they're all limited in practice this week. So they may not play, regardless of who's at quarterback, Cornelius or Arbuckle. That's a problem for this Edmonton team. You look at their home results. They lost by 16 against Hamilton last week. They lost by 10 against Winnipeg. They lost by 15 against Winnipeg at home. 16. They lost by 16 at home against Calgary. They lost by 17 at home against Montreal. So not only are they losing at home, they're getting whipped. They're getting blown out. They're losing these games by double digits. For me, it's Saskatchewan. It's a cheap price. You only have to lay 6.5. They win by a touchdown. You cover. The one concern is Saskatchewan wins close games. They have not been a blow you out type of team the last 5 weeks. You look at it. The BC win was by 7. They lost back-to-back to Calgary. And then the last 2 wins, they won by 3 at Calgary, and they won by 5 last week at Montreal. So it's not exactly a team that's been winning games by margin. But, boy, if there's one opponent they could win by margin against, it's got to be this Edmonton team. And for Saskatchewan, this is a critical game for them. They're second in the West Division. They're trying to fend off Calgary, and that's important because second place in the West is going to host the West Division semifinal as opposed to going on the road. And when you have a home field at Mosaic Stadium there that's as strong as Saskatchewan's, you want to get that second spot. You want to host that West Division semifinal at home. So it's an important game for Saskatchewan. I don't envision them overlooking Edmonton. And if you don't overlook Edmonton, you're not only going to beat them, you're probably going to beat them by margin. So I like the Riders there, laying 6.5 in that one. All right, let's turn our attention to Saturday. We've got Toronto and Ottawa. We've got the Argos 10.5-point road favorites, 45.5, 46 the total in this game. Ottawa's a team that I've just, I'm not making a case to bet Ottawa the rest of the season. All right, I'm just not. The question is, can you make a case to lay 10.5 with Toronto? And you look at last week against Calgary, and I did take Calgary in that game. They were laying 10.5, just like Toronto is here. And Calgary played pretty well, but still barely covered, 26-13. So that's the issue here. They're now pricing Ottawa like the bottom feeder team in the CFL that they are. And so, you don't necessarily have that best point spread value to go against them like you did before. That being said, they've lost 5 in a row. They're 1-4 against the spread. And 4 of those 5 losses were by double-digit margins. So, maybe you shouldn't hesitate to lay 10.5 here with the Argos. But, you look at the Argos coming off a win against BC, 31-29. And I still remember the previous meeting between Ottawa and Toronto at BMO Field. It was last month, early October. The Argos won that game and covered. They were 9-point home favorites. They won 35-16. That is about as misleading a final score as you'll see. The Argos had 2 pick sixes in that game thrown by Caleb Evans, and they also had a blocked punt return for a touchdown in that game. So they had 3 non-offensive touchdowns in that victory against Ottawa. And the box score in that game was 406 to 253 for Ottawa in terms of total yardage. So the Red Blacks moved the ball against Toronto's defense, but it was Toronto getting all the defensive scores, the special teams scores, and that was the difference in the end. But Caleb Evans had success against the Argos in that game, and actually was one of his better games. Unfortunately, the interceptions were disastrous. Like, he was moving the ball, but they had to settle for some field goals. Unfortunately, the 2 just devastating pick sixes were really the difference in that game, where Ottawa actually played not that bad statistically. So I'm a little bit hesitant this time around. Like last week, I knew I was going to lay the points with Calgary, 10.5-point road favorites in Ottawa. This week, I'm a little bit more on the fence, for the Argos laying 10.5 here in this game. I still lean Toronto. I want no part of Ottawa, but I'm a little bit more hesitant this week. So I lean Toronto. I don't know if I'll get there. If for some reason, I doubt it will, but if the line falls to 10 or below, then I'll definitely take something on Toronto. But if at the current line, I'm probably going to back away and stay off it. As far as the total goes, I would lean over here, 45.5. Now, I do believe they're calling for some wind here in Ottawa, kind of like the game in Hamilton on Friday night, but keep an eye on that. But, you look at the series history, there's been points, and for the Argos, I've been riding them over the total, 6-0 to the over for this Argos team in their last 6 games. McLeod Bethel-Thompson's been good at quarterback. I thought he played really well in the win against BC last week. His first chance to really start at quarterback as the man, the guy to be the starting quarterback moving forward for the Argos. There's no Nick Arbuckle anymore. You don't have to look over your shoulder. You are the number 1 quarterback, undisputed now for this Argos team, and he played very well. Thrived now, I think now. A little bit of a he can relax a little bit. He knows it's his team now. He played very well, and it's not like Ottawa's defense is capable of shutting down many teams. Look at the points they've allowed throughout the course of the season. Just the last few games, Ottawa's given up 26, 32, 27 in the last 3 games. So you got to peg Toronto can score in the 30s here. And if you can get at least 14, 17 points out of Ottawa, then there's your over. So over 45.5, lean to the Argos as well in this game. All right, final CFL game for Week 14, Montreal and Winnipeg. We've got Winnipeg 12.5-point home favorites, it looks like here, 45 the total in this game. This is I think, a pretty strong situational bet for me in this game between Montreal and Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers have accomplished everything they've needed to accomplish here in the regular season. They're coming off a bye week, and normally that's a bet on situation, right? Team off a bye week, extra time to prepare. I don't think that's the case this time around for Winnipeg. That 45-0 win over BC before their bye week in their last game 2 weeks ago clinched first place in the West Division for the Blue Bombers. So that means they've won the division. They're going to be hosting the West Division final in the CFL Grey Cup playoffs. So what is truly at stake here for Winnipeg? They're off the bye. They had a big celebration winning the West Division. What's at stake here in these final few regular season games? Now, give the Bombers credit. They're saying all the right things this week. And Mike O'Shea's saying it, that, hey, I don't think we're going to have motivation issues here. We're practicing hard. I've seen no difference in our practice habits from what we've seen all season long from my team. He's saying all the right things, but saying all those things and turning those words into action on the football field are two different things. I can't help. These are not computers or machines or robots. These are human beings. And yes, they've been dominant, No doubt. And their A game is good enough to blow out Montreal, just like every other team they've played. It's not even close between Winnipeg to me and the next best team in the CFL this year. That's how good Winnipeg has been. They're 6-0 straight up, 5-1 against the spread here at IG Field. A very strong home field edge. Most of those wins were by double digits. And look, if they show up and they have no hangover or flat spot, or they're not lethargic, they're not out of sync, they'll roll once again because they're that good. Zach Collaros on offense leading that team. The defense is the best defense by a mile in the CFL. They will roll once again if they're into this game. I'm just not convinced they're into this game. I mean, they're off the bye week, which I think stunts the momentum. They celebrated the division win. You don't have anything at stake here in these last 3 games. Nothing. There's nothing you can gain from winning these games in terms of standings or moving on up. You've clinched everything. And these are human beings. I mean, you could see this being the week where Winnipeg's just out of sync. They're flat. They're lethargic. They're looking toward the playoffs. I think you see that potentially show up in their game and their performance here on Saturday in this game against Montreal. I just find it difficult to believe that they're just going to come off the bye week with nothing at stake here in this game and just roll once again like they did in so many games before the bye week. Yeah, and now you contrast that to the Montreal situation going into this game, and every game for them is a huge game down the stretch. They're battling Toronto and Hamilton for first in the East Division. All 3 teams could still win that division. And Trevor Harris, who they just got from Edmonton a couple weeks ago, he'll make his first start for the Alouettes here in this game. He needed a change of scenery. Things were just disintegrated between him and the management of Edmonton and the head coach, Elizondo. I was shocked because of his history with Harris, how he benched him like that. You got to wonder if Sunderland, the GM, Brock Sunderland for Edmonton, maybe went to Elizondo and said, put Harris on the bench. We want to play Cornelius, because I can't envision that Elizondo made that call on his own. All the history he had with Trevor Harris. How can you treat a guy like that? Seriously. I mean, for a guy that hadn't proven anything in the CFL. So clearly the relationship was severed. It was time to move on. And now here he is in Montreal with the Alouettes. And getting his first start. And he actually got some time at the end of the game against Saskatchewan last week because Matt Schultz was struggling to get the offense going for the Alouettes. So, I think he's definitely going to be a very, very motivated quarterback. He knows it didn't end well in Edmonton. He didn't like the way it ended there. He's now been with this team long enough that he's got some pretty good knowledge, I think, by now of the systems, the terminology, the playbook here with this Alouettes offense. And we should absolutely get, full focus, full intensity for Montreal after the tough loss last week at home, 19-14 against Saskatchewan. Their defense played very well. Unfortunately, Matthew Schultz could not keep his great play on offense going. I think Montreal, this game just means a whole lot more to Montreal. It really does. On paper, it sure does. And you're getting 12.5 points. Montreal 6-5, their record this season, yet only one of those 5 losses were by more than this point spread. And all 4 of the 5 losses for Montreal were by margins of 9 points or less. I think they're in this game. I'm taking the plus 12.5. Given the spot, I'm not convinced you get Winnipeg's A game. I'm not convinced they're in sync in this game. And I got to hope they aren't. Because if they're Winnipeg pre-bye week, they're locked in, they're focused, they're not making mistakes, they're not committing penalties, they're not turning the ball over, then this could get away from Montreal. But if my hunch, and this is a bit of a hunch, is correct, that Winnipeg's a little lethargic, flat, again, they've wrapped up and clinched everything that they needed to, including the first place in the West Division, then I think that makes Montreal an appealing double-digit road underdog in this game. So I'm on Montreal here, plus 12.5. The over, I believe, is cashed in 5 of the last 6 meetings as well between Montreal and Winnipeg. And this could be a game where on the defensive side, Winnipeg, just a little bit, when you're a little bit flat and lethargic, it tends to show up, especially for good defensive teams on that side of the football. So would lean over the total here in this one as well, 45 with the Alouettes and the Bombers. All right, let's turn our attention now to the NFL. We've got week 9 now in the NFL. It's unbelievable how quickly this season's going. We start with the New York Jets and the Indianapolis Colts. Indy, 10-point home favorites here, 45 the total in this game. This is definitely more respect being given to the Jets in this point spread, based on Mike White's incredible performance last week, 400 passing yards in that game. Very, very impressive showing for him against a Cincinnati defense that was playing quite well. I think when you look at this game here tonight, it was a great, great performance from Mike White. This is a bit different, though, now. You're on a short week. You're going on the road for the first time, and you're playing, indoors. It should be a loud environment. Can you handle it now? It's a lot easier playing at home, playing on the road on a short week. Now there's also some game film, if you will, on Mike White. We'll see if that's going to make things a little bit tougher for him. However, all that being said, he looked legit last week, to be honest with you. Like, they let him throw the ball down the field. He was deadly accurate with the ball. And Cincinnati's defense is not chopped liver. Yeah, they might have been flat after the Baltimore win, but still, you got to give Mike White a ton of credit. And you look at the Colts defense, going into this game, it's not been great. They've given up 25 or more in 5 of their 8 games this year. The last 2 games where it looks like they played well on defense was the San Francisco game that was played in a monsoon and heavy rain, heavy wind. You don't want to give them too much credit for that. And then the other good defensive game was against Houston, which has one of the worst offenses in the NFL. They have just been not very good. So I think there's a pathway here for the New York Jets and Mike White to maybe put some points on the board. Seriously. I mean, I liked what I saw, the accuracy. I like that he spread the ball around. I like that they got Michael Carter going, running the football, Ty Johnson as well. You look at the receivers that got the ball, Michael Carter in the receiving game out of the backfield, Jamison Crowder at 8 receptions, Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, Keelan Cole had a couple of magnificent catches, Tyler Kroft, the tight end, Braxton Berrios. I mean, it was just I like that he didn't just lock in on 1 or 2 receivers. There are how many players on this Jets team? 8 last week that had at least 2 receptions. So that was a good thing. And then on the flip side, Carson Wentz, who actually had a pretty good game against Tennessee last week, aside from the absolutely 2 brutal, horrendous interceptions he made. Like, you've got to be brain dead, man, to make that throw in your own end zone. Left-handed, it's not even your throwing hand. With 3 guys draped all over you, you just chuck the ball up in the air, middle of the field, out of your own end zone. What do you think is going to happen? Bad things. That's what's going to happen, and that is exactly what happened to Carson Wentz in that terrible play late in the fourth quarter. And then this Colts offense, by the way, how many of their big touchdown drives have stemmed from Carson Wentz underthrowing the football, letting the receiver just come into a dead stop, banging into a helpless cornerback, and there's pass interference flag being thrown. How many times have we seen that for the Colts now the last few weeks? That's been such a big part of their offense the last few weeks. And unfortunately, the Jets secondary is horrendous. It's terrible. So they may not be swift enough to, maybe catch on to that. And you could see them falling into that same issue tonight against this Colts team. So I expect Indy to be able to move the ball. Look, the Jets, they've gone over the total in 4 straight games. They've given up 24, 27, 54, 31. I mean, Robert Saleh was brought in to fix the defense. It certainly still has not happened yet. And then on the flip side, you see the Colts defense, like I said, 25 or more, 5 of their 8 games. There's not going to be any weather. We're indoors at Indy. I like this game over the total here, especially 45. Now, I get there's some injuries at receiver for the Colts. That's what's impacting this number. T.Y. Hilton's out. That matters. That's significant. I get that. Paris Campbell's out now long-term with a foot injury. So you're down a couple key weapons here for Carson Wentz. But look, they should be able to run the football effectively. Jets are allowing, haven't been great against the run. They've been terrible against the pass. You've still got other receivers here for the Colts that are capable of stepping up. This means more Michael Pittman. And Michael Pittman's had a very good stretch of games for the Indianapolis Colts. So, rely more on Pittman, rely more on Zach Pascal, Jack Doyle, the tight end. You got more than enough guys still to be able to move the ball here. Total's reasonable. It's 45. It's not like we're asking for an extreme shootout here. I like the over 45 here, Jets and the Colts. All right, let's go to Sunday and the rest of week 9. Houston and Miami. Miami, 5.5-point home favorites, 46.5 the total in this game. Pass. That's all I'm going to say. This is not a game I have any interest in whatsoever. Perhaps the under, but because these are two offenses that I don't necessarily trust. Tua Tagovailoa hasn't played great. Certainly not last week against Buffalo. The Houston offense is abysmal. So maybe this game can stay under the total, but I ain't laying 5.5 with Miami right now, and there's no way I'm taking Houston on the road. Houston's worst performances, to be honest, have been on the road this year. So I want no part of Texans and Dolphins. So we'll move on to Denver, Dallas. Dallas 10-point home favorites, 49.5 the total in this game. Dak Prescott missing the game last week against the Minnesota Vikings. No problem, though. They get the victory, 20-16 in that one. Dallas, they have covered every single point spread this year, 7-0 ATS for the Dallas Cowboys to go with that 6-1 straight-up record. It's been very impressive, no question about that. But we're now laying 10 points with Dallas here in this game. That's a little bit dubious here, if you ask me. And yes, Dak Prescott is likely going to be back here. It seems like he's been upgraded to probable. So obviously that is also impacting this point spread a little bit. But there are some key injuries cropping up here for the Cowboys. The defensive line has multiple key pieces missing. Neville Gallimore, DeMarcus Lawrence, along the defensive front are not likely to play in this game. Trayvon Diggs, he's battling an ankle injury. He's likely going to play, but he's got an ankle sprain. Can you move around at 100% with it? That's the question. Michael Gallup's questionable. Amari Cooper's got a hamstring problem. He's questionable. Blake Jarwin, the tight end, not going to play due to a hip injury. Tyron Smith left the last game against Minnesota due to a bone spur in his left ankle, and he's not going to play. And we know Tyron Smith is a huge component of the Dallas Cowboys offensive line. So definitely a situation here where a lot of issues right now for Dallas from an injury standpoint. And I get it. That's why this game's difficult for me. Like, I think there's better plays on the board this Sunday in the NFL than going against a team that's 7-0 ATS this year, like Dallas. It's almost like we want to see this team not cover a number first before we go against them. Part of me thinks that. Part of me also thinks this is just too many points here with the Dallas Cowboys injury situation, with the Denver Broncos getting I guess you could say, a season-saving win against Washington. Like, if they had any chance of trying to get back into the playoff picture in the AFC, they had to win that game against Washington. And boy, it was ugly. I mean, they did everything. It's like, hey, here, we don't want to win this game, Washington. You take it with that fumble in the final couple minutes. But thankfully, they hung on. They stopped Taylor Heineke with that final possession, and they hung on for a 17-10 win. This defense better plan on playing as good as it did against Washington. And look, they're going to have to do it now against a much more explosive, dynamic offense, because the offense is struggling to really put up points. Teddy Bridgewater's been not quite the same since he came back from that brief injury stint. The good news is we had Jerry Jeudy back. He made an impact. Jerry Jeudy is a difference maker. To go with Cortland Sutton, to go with Tim Patrick, to go with Noah Fant, now all of a sudden you've got a decent receiving core to work with here for the Denver Broncos in this game. So it's an interesting game. See how it goes. It's tough. I lean Denver, though. Now that it's 10, I've got to lean to Denver at least. I don't know if I'm going to play it. Like I said, with these teams that are perfect ATS, it's almost like let's wait and see them not cover a point spread first before we look to bet against them. But it is a lot of points. And look, the injuries are mounting for Dallas. Offensive line, defensive line. Mari Cooper at receiver. Blake Jarwin, a very good tight end. Trayvon Diggs got an ankle issue now. He's going to play, but could he be limited a little bit mobility-wise? Potentially. And we know how great he's been for that secondary. So, tough game. But I lean Denver at plus 10. I think in terms of the total, 49.5. Dak is back, but and I've been betting a lot of Dallas overs. I might pump the brakes on it this week, though. Like, he is coming back off the calf issue. That's a concern. Is he going to be just stepping right back in, be great again? And is the Denver defense going to look like the Denver defense last week? Or is it going to look like the Denver defense that prior to the win against Washington, they're Steelers and the Las Vegas Raiders carved them up pretty well in those two games. So that's going to be the big question in that one. All right, next up, we've got Minnesota, Baltimore. Baltimore 6-point home favorites, 50 the total. I'm on Baltimore here, -6. I don't trust Minnesota at all. And look, it's Baltimore is playing their best football right now of the season. I don't think you can deny that with how things have gone for the Ravens. Now, look, and what I also like for the Ravens too is, they're coming off that shellacking at the hands of the Cincinnati Bengals, 41-7. Before that, they had won 5 in a row. It was a dose of reality. It was a wake-up call. It was a slap in the face that you not only lost at home to Cincinnati, but that you were absolutely trampled in that game by the Cincinnati Bengals, 41-17. I was shocked at the Baltimore defense just essentially coming apart at the seams. The run game got going with Mixon. Joe Burrow and was just attacking that secondary down the field, whether it was Uzoma, the tight end, or Jamar Chase, or T. Higgins. I mean, he had a field day throwing the football against that Baltimore defense. Baltimore off a bye week and a bad loss that doesn't sit well, that leaves a bad taste in their mouth. This definitely looks like a situation where they could come in here fully motivated, focused, play a great bounce back game against a team I don't trust. That is as bad as it gets for Minnesota. Yeah, obviously in terms of the margin, it wasn't that bad. They only lost by 4. But I've got people in Minnesota and other people in my area that are Vikings fans that have been lifelong Vikings fans that say that's one of the worst losses we've ever had. Given the situation going into that game, playing Cooper Rush at quarterback, with Dallas obviously having that issue, with Minnesota at home, trying to get on a little bit of a win streak. It was just a debacle. Kirk Cousins goes down the field on the first drive of the game, and they do nothing on offense the rest of the game. How is that possible? How do you look so good on that opening drive if you're the Minnesota Vikings and you do basically nothing on offense the rest of the game? Just absolutely pitiful. And then the defense, which, didn't play bad, but you cannot, at home with that crowd, you cannot let Cooper Rush go right down the field like a hot knife through butter on the drive that won the game for the Dallas Cowboys. You cannot give up a 3rd and 10 screen pass, miss tackles, and give up the first down to Zeke Elliott on that drive. That was horrible defense, awful by the Minnesota Vikings. Penalties that kept the Dallas drives alive in that game. Penalties, just defensive breakdowns at the worst time. The offense did nothing after that first drive. That was pitiful. And that falls on the coaching staff. And then I got to hear Xavier Woods for Minnesota. This was a unbelievable remark from Xavier Woods, the safety for the Vikings, after the loss to Dallas on Sunday night, quoted as saying, they asked him a question, was it tough to prepare during the week, knowing that Dak Prescott probably couldn't play? And he said, oh, well, you know what? We prepared for Dak all week. That's what we spent time doing. We put all our preparation into Dak Prescott. If that's not throwing your coaching staff under the bus, I don't know what is. And if you're Mike Zimmer, how the hell are you that confident that, and how do you not know that Dak Prescott probably isn't going to play? Because everybody knew he was likely not going to play. Now, we never got confirmation till right before the game. But for Xavier Woods to step up and say, we were preparing for Dak all week, is just awful by the Minnesota coaching staff. And Zimmer, who I've liked for a long time, but he's got to bear the brunt of this. That's inexcusable if that's true, that all week long you're preparing for Dak when the majority of the public knows that there's a damn good chance he's not going to play. He was highly questionable to play that game at best. At best, he was highly questionable to play that game. In fact, he was probably more likely doubtful to play. And by the way, clearly Mike Zimmer's not a bettor or not interested in the point spreads or the betting lines, because the betting line shifted from Dallas as a favorite to Minnesota as a favorite. Did that not give you a clue? Did that not maybe allow you to screw in and figure out that maybe, just maybe, Dak Prescott wouldn't play, and that maybe, just maybe, we should be putting some time in the defensive game plan and preparation for that game into Cooper Rush? And apparently it didn't click in. for Mike Zimmer there. I mean, great Christ, the betting markets pushed Minnesota to a favorite because everybody was pretty confident Dak wasn't going to play Sunday night. Everybody knew apparently except Mike Zimmer. How does that happen? My gosh. I mean, it's just I was stunned when I heard Xavier Woods say that. First of all, that he said it, and second of all, that they actually legitimately did put all their stock and defensive prep for the Dallas game in Dak Prescott with a high chance that he wasn't even going to play. Just bad all around. And you think I'm going to trust now Minnesota to prepare properly for an angry, rested Baltimore team coming off a bye week at home? I'm not. Am I going to trust Kirk Cousins to move the ball against a defense that I think wants to get some pride restored after Cincinnati ripped them apart a couple weeks ago? Yeah, I'm laying the points here with Baltimore. -6. Great spot. Bounce back at home. Last time they played on this field, they got embarrassed by Cincinnati. They're a better team than they showed 2 weeks ago, and more importantly, they're a better team than the Minnesota Vikings. Baltimore -6 for me. New England and Carolina. New England 3.5-point road favorites. 41 the total in this game. This one's tricky here. Carolina is. I don't think I trust Carolina to take them here. Do I want to lay 3.5 on the road now with the Patriots? I'm not sure. But boy, I mean, New England's looking like a team that's better than 4-4 record. That performance against the Chargers last week was very good. We're going to have to see who's at quarterback here for the Carolina Panthers, Sam Darnold or PJ Walker. That's going to end up being the question. Darnold in concussion protocol after just a devastating hit he took down inside the 5-yard line against Atlanta last week. But if it's PJ Walker, or Philip, I think he was called Philip Walker. I think he's PJ Walker again. I don't know if I'm trusting him to move the football here for this Carolina team. I'm just not. Now, I thought Carolina had a shot to beat Atlanta, and they did that 19-13. And look, one thing about Carolina is with Stephon Gilmore back in the secondary, that's a much better defense. And we saw just the absolute difference maker he was. I mean, that passing game for Atlanta did nothing last week. And I think Stephon Gilmore's return in the Panthers secondary really played a big part in that defensive performance by the Panthers in that game. So, that's going to be a challenge here for a Carolina defense that's really been the unit that's kept this team afloat most of the year. You look at their record, 4-4 Carolina. They have their defense to thank for many of those wins because the offense has been pretty poor most of the year. So I lean to the under in this game. I mean, I don't really love either side, but I lean to the under. I know New England's gone over in 4 straight, but look, they've played Dallas. They played a Jets team that's not playing any defense. They're playing the Chargers, who are a bit of an over team with a great offense and a not so good defense. This is a game where it's probably going to go under. The problem is, though, it opened 43.5. It's down to 41. So a lot of the value is taken out, but I could only look for a lower scoring game here. Buffalo, Jacksonville. Buffalo, 14.5-point road favorites, 48.5 the total. I'm probably passing on this game, but I could only lay it with Buffalo. Problem is, Buffalo was asleep for pretty much the entire first half at home against Miami. And if they're asleep for the first half against Jacksonville here, that's going to make it a challenge for them to cover a number of this size on the road. But I cannot get to Jacksonville here. You come out of the bye week, you won your first game against Miami in London. You're coming out of a bye week. You think, hey, there's a chance maybe to get on a little bit of a run here. And you play like that last week against Seattle. That's just bad all around. That's got just a massive red flag written all over it. That you won your first game, you're off a bye week, you have time to prepare for the Seahawks, and you play that game last week against Seattle. Inept on both sides of the ball. Offense stunk. Defense lets Geno Smith go up and down the field for the entire game. That was brutal from the Jaguars last week. Absolutely awful. And for Urban Meyer and the coaching staff, that's a terrible look. Bye week, extra time to prepare. You get your first win, and you have a chance maybe to build on it. And that's the game. That's the performance you put out there on the field last week against a Seattle team that was reeling going into that game. And Geno Smith had a brutal game the week before that against New Orleans on Monday night. And that's the guy that goes out there last weekend against that Jaguars defense and rips you apart. So it's almost at the point where I just don't trust Jacksonville here, even though they're getting a shit ton of points. It's a game that I'm probably going to end up staying away from. It's a lot to lay with Buffalo, but I'd probably prefer the Bills side in that one. Cleveland, Cincinnati. Cincinnati 2.5-point home favorites, 47 the total. Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of the Browns' lives. I mean, what a soap opera right now with that team, with Odell Beckham Jr. and his father basically tweeting out a bunch of video highlights of Baker Mayfield throwing the football to everyone but his son, ignoring him, not using him, not throwing the ball to him. And Odell Beckham Jr. apparently liking the tweet, and retweeting it and all that. And now there's dissension with him, with Odell Beckham Jr. and Baker Mayfield, to the point now where the Browns are just about to say, you know what, we've had it with the distractions. The guy can't even stay healthy on the football field, and it's not like he's made a huge impact when he has been on the field for the Browns, and now he's doing this nonsense, him and his pops. It's time to pull the plug. And Kevin Stefanski, apparently from reports, has already told players that, hey, we're going forward like he's not on the team anymore. So it's just, look, there's some chemistry issues right now. There's some real turmoil, I believe, in that Browns locker room at the moment. And then you add on to that the injury situation, which has been a problem for weeks now with the Browns, with all the injuries. So it's just a team that I have a hard time backing them right now. The Pittsburgh game last week was pretty brutal in the second half for the offense in that game. I like Cincy in this game. I'm not going to be one of those guys that's prisoner of the moment here and says, you know what? Cincinnati lost to the Jets this week. What a fraud. What a sham this team is. They fooled all of us with the fact, making us believe they were good. No, they're not as good as they were against Baltimore, but there's no way this Bengals team is as bad as they were last week against the Jets either. They're somewhere in between. They've got a much better game in them. They've played some pretty good football on their home field this year. I think things are a little bit of a mess right now for the Browns. They're still a banged up, beleaguered team, like on both sides of the ball. Denzel Ward in the secondary, the offensive line now. Jack Conklin's out again, the right tackle. Their offensive line's been banged up. I think Treader and Wills, the center and the left tackle, they might play, but they're playing through something from an injury standpoint. There's just it's difficult to back Cleveland, especially after what I saw against Pittsburgh last week. You had a million opportunities to win that game, and you just coughed it up. You just could not find a way. Cincinnati, after all the quotes from Cincy are positive. That, hey, we got a dose of reality. We learned last week that anybody can beat anybody on any given week in the NFL. I think they come back strong here. It's only laying less than a field goal. I like Cincy here. Let's see what the injury status is, but I could see points being scored in this game. Do lean to the over in this one, but I like the side even more. I just think there's a lot more cohesion right now and a lot more camaraderie at this point in time with the Bengals. And I think when you look at two teams off the losses that they both had last week, I think I trust the Bengals to bounce back more than a Cleveland team that looks like there's some issues behind the scenes, issues in the locker room. The injuries on the field are still a big time problem. Too many key injuries on both sides of the football. For me, it's the Bengals in the Battle of Ohio. Las Vegas, New York Giants. Las Vegas 3-point road favorites in this one. Total 46 across the board. Look, the Henry Ruggs situation is Las Vegas has shown you the ability to overcome distractions and situations off the field that you would think would impact performance on it with the John Gruden stuff a few weeks ago. They put it behind them, and all they did was they played two outstanding games back-to-back against Denver on the road and then Philadelphia back home. So they've shown you a track record of putting tough situations, potential distractions behind them, focusing on playing a football game and playing well. This is different, though. This is one of their teammates. This is a guy that's been in the locker room all year with them that obviously had a terrible made a terrible mistake to get behind the wheel, crash the car, go 156 miles per hour, which is unbelievable when I read that. Crash into rear end the vehicle, kill an innocent victim in that vehicle. You end up with your own head and neck injuries. Now you're likely going to prison. Raiders have already cut him. That's a different kind of distraction. And I'm wondering, can they overcome that now, this time around? That's why, to me, this is just, I want to really get a gauge. Derek Carr, the leadership group of this Raiders team, where are their heads at going into this game? Because, boy, early in the week, I was thinking Las Vegas was a very, very good bet. -3, off a bye week, playing good football. I don't trust the Giants. Are not good at home. Giants aren't good as home dogs. They're good as road dogs. They're not good as short home dogs. They're coming on a short week after a very tough, hard-fought, close loss to Kansas City on Monday Night Football. I don't trust them to win this game. So I was all lined up, ready to rock here with Las Vegas -3. And I would still only look to the Raiders. I want no part of the Giants at this number in this game. The Raiders are the better of these two teams right now. And they're off a bye, so I don't mind the early start time on the East Coast for Las Vegas. But the bye week negates that as a potential bad spot. But for me, it's just about where's the focus right now for the Las Vegas Raiders here in this game after just this incredibly tragic situation with their teammate. So again, Las Vegas -3. I've still got it on my radar. We'll mull it over. We'll see what the vibe is like with the team on Friday. The final comments before the game, before we make my final decision. But I'm definitely only interested in Las Vegas in that game. We'll see if they can once again put distractions off the field behind them and play a good game. They've done it twice now. See if they can do it a 3-time, although this is a different matter altogether. Atlanta, New Orleans. New Orleans 6.5-point home favorites, 42 the total. How telling is it that Jameis Winston's out? We don't know if Taysom Hill for sure is going to be back for the Saints. So it's either going to be him or Trevor Siemian at quarterback for the Saints. And yet the number's actually going up in this game, and the money's coming in on New Orleans. You know what that tells you? It tells you how bad things are in Atlanta right now. Like the Falcons, to me, are unbackable. They're unbackable. To me, this is you lay the points or you don't bet the game. Like Atlanta was inept last week. Defense still stinks. The offense, Matt Ryan didn't even crack 100 passing yards last week. No Calvin Ridley. He's taken a pause for mental health reasons. And without Ridley on the field, this is suddenly a very, very defendable Atlanta passing attack. And we saw that on full display when they played Carolina last week. It's just a bad situation for Atlanta. Yeah, could there be a little bit of that was a huge win for New Orleans against Tampa Bay. They played Monday night in Seattle 2 weeks ago, a big, America's game of the week, the Fox late window game against Brady and the Bucks last week. Could they fall flat here potentially? But I don't know if Atlanta's good enough to do anything about it at this point in time. So I would lean to the Saints, and yeah, I agree with that. Can't get right in our chat saying the under, but the under's been hit already, 45.5 down to 42. Saints don't want a high scoring game. It's run the football with Kamara. It's keep our quarterbacks in short down and distance situations. That's the game plan moving forward for the Saints. So the under makes sense. I agree with that. And like I say, without Ridley, man, that takes a huge big play component out of this Atlanta Falcons offense. All right, LA Chargers, Philadelphia Eagles. Chargers 1.5 2-point road favorites, 50 the total in this game. I'm going to come back to the Chargers here. I know Philadelphia looked great last week, but come on, Detroit Lions? Really? I mean, people are getting excited again for Philadelphia. Like, wow, maybe they can make something of this season now. We beat Detroit. See, beat a good team, please. Can you do that before I get that excited in what the Eagles did last week? Now, granted, they controlled the line of scrimmage. They got pressure on Jared Goff. They stopped the run. Their offensive line mauled Detroit. Gave Jalen Hurts time to throw the ball. They ran it well. They did everything well against Detroit. But you're not playing Detroit now. Playing the Chargers. You're playing the Chargers off a loss that was really – players were angry. Players were pissed off. If you read all the quotes from the Chargers after that loss to New England on Sunday, they were not happy. All right. And this is a better team than they showed in that game last week. Step down in class. This is going to be a late start. It's going to 1 p.m. Pacific start time. So even though it's a West Coast team traveling east, that's a little bit better, a little bit more digestible for them. I'm Chargers for me. Especially if this stays below a field goal. Yeah, I'm definitely looking at the Chargers side in this game. Chargers overs. I would lean with the over as well in this game. They're an over team. Their offense is great. Now, their offense wasn't great last week. A lot of drop passes. Justin Herbert wasn't sharp, but I think he's got a bounce-back game, and so does this offense. I think they've got a bounce-back performance in them. I think you'll see it here. So I lean to the Chargers and the over. Green Bay, Kansas City, 7.5 point home favorites for the Chiefs, 47.5 the total. Overreaction City. Overreaction City is my first thought. I get it. There's no Aaron Rodgers. COVID. He's out. Jordan Love is in. Jordan Love played relatively well in the preseason. Now, I get it. It's preseason. You're not playing a starting defense. But at what point has Kansas City's starting defense been good this year? Hasn't been. And you're asking a team that is what, 3-15-1 against the spread in their last 19 games. Think about that. 3-15-1 against the spread. Kansas City Chiefs, last 19 games. You're asking them now to lay 7.5? No, thank you. Give me Green Bay. This reminds me of Green Bay, Arizona all over again, where we were worried about who's not playing for Green Bay and not focused on guys stepping up and who could get it done for Green Bay. And I think you're going to see that here. Jordan Love's got also some mobility. I like that against Kansas City's defense. They over pursue on the defensive side of the football too, and that could leave them vulnerable to a guy that's got some mobility, some athleticism like Jordan Love as well. It's an overreaction. It's also Kansas City on a short week. Let's not forget that. And it's Green Bay with a little bit of extra time to get ready for this game, having played Thursday night last week against Arizona. So give me the Packers here. It's just too much of an overreaction. Yes, he's worth a good amount of to the point spread, Aaron Rodgers. But we're talking 2.5 now to 7.5, like 3 points for sure. But now that it's crossed the key number of 3 and it's crossed the key number of 7, to me that's just too much of an adjustment for no Aaron Rodgers here in this game. So Green Bay for me. And I actually might take the over at a devalued number, 47.5 here in this game. I could see the Chiefs offense moving it. I think Jordan Love's going to have a good game. It's just my sense. I think he's going to have a very good game here for the Packers on Sunday. So Packers plus the points and lean over the total as well. All right, Arizona, San Francisco. Arizona, 1-2-point road favorites, 45.5, 46 the total. Keep your eye on the injury stuff for Arizona because, we know J.J. Watt's out for the year, but Rodney Hudson along the offensive line, he might return this week, but it's not sure. Kyler Murray's been really hit hard the last few weeks. He's taken some big hits, and you wonder if it's going to impact him a little bit. I just don't know if I trust San Francisco in this game. It's a revenge game for San Fran. They lost to Arizona, and look, 3-4 is their record. But are we really gonna get super impressed with them beating Chicago last week, 33-22? Before that, they lost to Indy, they lost to Arizona, they lost to Seattle, they lost to Green Bay. I mean, they just haven't beaten many good teams. I mean, Chicago, Detroit, and I guess their one decent win was at Philadelphia. That's it for the 49ers. So, yeah, it's a banged up Arizona team. I'm still not taking San Fran. I would only look to Arizona, but I do want to see their injury report get cleared up a little bit going into this game. And I also worry that, look, when you're undefeated and you lose that first game, sometimes you lose a couple more after that. So, now that the aura of that undefeated start is gone for Arizona after the loss to Green Bay. And look, I've made a shit ton of money with Arizona this year. Everybody knows it. That's watched this show, that's watched any of my NFL content this year on this channel. But I don't know if this is the week I'm going to back Arizona. I would only look Arizona in this game, but let's see how healthy they are going into Sunday. Tennessee, LA Rams, Sunday Night Football. LA Rams, 7.5-point home favorites, 54 the total in this game. Obviously, a big adjustment here. No Derrick Henry. I think the safest play is the Rams in a teaser. You tease the Rams down to 1.5 on a 6-point teaser because I do think they win the game. I'd be reluctant, though, to lay 7.5. The one issue with taking the points with Tennessee is Ryan Tannehill. The difference in Tannehill with Henry and without Henry is significant. With Henry on the field and when they're able to successfully run the football with him, it opens up everything. And he's a much better quarterback when he's got play action to work with. They've got to respect the run, and it opens up things down the field for the tight ends, for A.J. Brown and the receiving core. And it's just such a different offense when Derrick Henry's on that field, and you're not going to have that here in this game against the Rams. Now, I think it's I don't know if I'd want to lay 7.5, but I do feel reasonably confident that Matthew Stafford and the Rams are going to win the football game. So 1.5 in a teaser feels like the best bet to make in this game to be safe. They could cover the number, but And the one thing, too, about Tennessee, down to the wire barn burner with Buffalo, big win against Kansas City, huge, huge overtime win in the division against the Indianapolis Colts, essentially the only team that can catch you for first place in the AFC South. At some point, you hit a physical wall. At some point, you hit an emotional wall. Is this the game where that happens for Tennessee? Those were 3 consecutive big games and huge wins for the Titans. The Bills, the Chiefs, the Colts. Are you going to all of a sudden maybe just hit a wall here, especially with no Derrick Henry? I worry about that. So that's why I probably put Rams in a teaser. Chicago, Pittsburgh, Monday Night Football. Pittsburgh Steelers, 6.5 point home favorites, 40 the total in this game. I lean under. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. Pittsburgh's defense, look, what Pittsburgh's defense did against Cleveland last week was impressive. I know they're banged up, but they had Baker back. It's still an offense and Nick Chubb was back. They still have some guys that can make things happen offensively for the Browns on the field. The O-line got a little bit healthier, and although Conklin left the game last week, but for Pittsburgh to pretty much put a blanket over Cleveland's offense in Cleveland for that entire game shows you how well the Steeler defense is playing right now. And that could be trouble here for Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense in this game. So keep an eye on that Pittsburgh defense. This may not be an easy assignment when it's all said and done for Fields and this Bears offense. Don't know if I'd want to lay 6 or 6.5 with Pittsburgh. They're always that team that offensively with Big Ben, and we saw it last week against Cleveland, a 5-point win, 15-10. They didn't exactly have great red zone execution, and to be able to cover and win, to be able to cash a ticket when you're 6.5 point favorites, you need to be able to execute in the red zone at a relatively high level. I'm not sure we're getting that really from Pittsburgh. This number seems like it's in a really good spot. I doubt I'm involved in the game from a betting standpoint Monday night, except maybe the under. But again, we're talking 40. It's a pretty low total, but I think it's warranted. I don't see Chicago going up and down the field against Pittsburgh's defense. And at the same point in time, Pittsburgh's offense, after the Bears have faced, Tampa Bay, the Green Bay. I mean, they played some pretty good offenses here, Chicago. This might be a time for their defense to step up, play better, because Pittsburgh's offense, they're moving the ball at times. Najee Harris on the ground, the receiving core as well, but the O-line's struggling for the Steelers, and the red zone offense just hasn't been good. So it does feel like it should be a lower scoring game. Total is very low, though, sitting at 40. Great stuff. That is the football breakdown. CFL and NFL. We'll wrap up the show in just a second. Thanks to everyone for joining us live. Hit the like button. Make sure you do that. On the way out, we'll get to a CFL and NFL best bet to wrap up the show in just a second. But first, messages from Manscaped and Southtown 101. All right, Southtown 101. When you're in San Antonio, Texas, stop in. Great food, drinks, live music, DJs, and karaoke at Southtown 101. Manscaped, promo code PubSports. Get 20% off your purchase of the Lawnmower 4.0 or any product with Manscaped.com using the promo code PubSports. And MyBookie.ag, promo code PubSports. NFL, college football, there's still plenty of season left. NHL and NBA are here. College basketball tips off next week. Great time of the year. Sign up for an account at mybookie.ag. Bitcoin accepted currency for your deposit as well. Mybookie.ag, promo code PubSports. All right, best bets, and we'll do what we've done the last few weeks. We'll give you one CFL and one NFL best bet. CFL, we'll go with Montreal. Alouette. Jante Alouette. Montreal Alouettes plus 12.5 against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Not easy to go against Winnipeg. This is a freight train. This has been a juggernaut in the CFL this year. But if there's ever one spot to fade them, it's here. Off a bye week, they've clinched everything. They've wrapped up first in the West. I can't see this team being that same sharp, locked-in Winnipeg Blue Bomber team this week against a Montreal team with everything to play for. Trevor Harris should give this offense a shot in the arm. And look, the defense hasn't played that badly lately in the last few games. I just think it's too many points for a game that matters a whole lot more to the Alouettes than it does to the satisfied road home favorites. So Montreal plus 12.5 against Winnipeg for my CFL best bet. My NFL best bet, I am going to go to, as we look at the card here, let me just see. I want to give you something that I've locked in already as a bet. I'm good. Baltimore -6. Let's do that. Baltimore -6 against Minnesota. It's just a great situation all around. Ravens off a bye. Prior to that was that terrible game against Cincinnati in the division. A Minnesota team coming off a crushing loss at home to a Dallas team playing their backup quarterback, going on the road against a Baltimore team. Extra time to prepare for Harbaugh, Wink Martindale, and that Ravens staff against that Minnesota team. I don't see Kirk Cousins and the offense having a boatload of success. Remember, Baltimore's defense was playing better. Remember what Baltimore's defense did to the Chargers a few weeks ago, and then they got ripped apart by Cincinnati. I think they want to atone for that in this game. Ravens -6 against the Minnesota Vikings for my NFL best bet here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. And with that, that wraps up another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. I'll be back next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, with another edition of the show. And I'll be back later this afternoon, NBA Pub Hub, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. Me and the crew breaking down the Thursday NBA card. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Appreciate it. Enjoy the games and good luck. Enjoy your football weekend. Cash some tickets. And we'll see you again next Thursday right here for another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy on Pub Sports Radio.